Hey everybody, it's Jill here, and I am with Joe Sweeney and Rachel Siska and Heather Shriver, and we are here to talk about the ASSERVO Project, where these people are fighting human trafficking. Joe started this project about 2 years ago. Joe, tell us how you began to be concerned about human trafficking.
Sure. Well, my career started out in law enforcement with the Pittsburgh Police Force in 1993. And after the police force, 9/11 occurred, and I took a position with Homeland Security for 5 years. And then I also started to see some exposure there in some of the assignments that we would get. And then I transferred over to the State Department as a contractor. And this is where I realized through some colleagues of mine who were already doing cases as volunteers about the epidemic of human trafficking and child exploitation, and I got asked to be involved.
So how prevalent is this problem in the United States today?
Well, I tell you, it's not only here, it's globally. Right now there's an estimated victim every year added into the industry of forced labor or sexual exploitation of 40 million people. 40
million people.
That's per year. Right now it's estimated that it's between 100 and 200 million people are being in forced labor, sexual commercial trade, or organ harvesting.
Now, people think this is something that happens somewhere else.
Farther from the truth.
Yeah.
The United States, the commercial sex trade here is estimated to be $35 to $40 billion a year.
Wow.
There's estimated 9 million children are at risk every year to be either sexually or physically abused. You know, where child predator situations used to be a standalone problem, which is also, I believe, as fast growing as human trafficking is. And you can just simply read your local news reports of the predators we have in our schools, our communities, our churches, workplace, Boy Scout camps, Girl Scout camps. Anywhere where there are children, there are predators to prey on them. And they say there's the growing risk of that now is also a subset of human trafficking because it's all driven by the dollars. It's billions of dollars, this criminal enterprise to be made.
So it's not just an affront to humanity, it's a money-making scheme at the same time.
Absolutely. The estimated gross revenue is $200 billion a year globally. And these are estimates. These are dollars that they can track and identify. Mm-hmm. So you do the math. I would probably say it's 1.5 to 2 times that, because there's so much going on that can't be tracked in some countries, and that includes our own.
And what is ASSERVO Project doing to fight this?
Well, we came up with the model, being a former law enforcement officer and federal employee. We met with law enforcement agencies that were our friends through these years, and we asked them about this problem. When we were exposed to these types of statistics and data, we realized there needed to be something else besides law enforcement, because law enforcement doesn't have the budgets and the manpower. Crime is on the rise. Budgets are tight. So our motto was, if we could bring these skills under a nonprofit banner like the ASSERVO Project, people that are former law enforcement, former military, former federal employees, we can support law enforcement in the skills of cyber tracking, cyber analytics, investigations, and surveillance, and we can share this information with law enforcement as a support arm, as a nonprofit. We don't get ahead of law enforcement. We have no authority. We are simply an information gathering organization here to come alongside law enforcement and support as needed.
Because this is such a big problem that law enforcement can't do it all by themselves.
No, and we spoke to them. They're doing their best.
Yeah.
They're running investigations, but they'll tell you they just don't have enough officers to dedicate to a scope of this magnitude or the budgets.
So, what kind of things are you working on right now?
Right now, well, I tell you, it's been a busy month. We've had people come in who were suspecting of some of their family members being abused. One's as young as 2 to 3 years old.
My God.
And it's by a family member, which is indicative to the information we've received through some of the studies of other nonprofits that actually track the data of this problem. Most sexual predators or people being trafficked or victimed, especially when it comes to young children, are either a family member or known to the family. There's a trust there. So no one's looking for it, right? So this continues on till maybe the person's 4, 5, 6, 7 into their teens before anybody realizes that something's going on.
You say family members. This could be parents, siblings?
All the above.
Aunts, uncles,
all the above.
anybody.
We have a case right now where they think the father's abusing his own daughter, and she's, I think, 4 or 5 years old.
Oh.
And it's also siblings. It's also intergenerational. We've talked to folks that they were victims themselves as kids. They're now adults. Some of them are even in their 40s, 50s, and they see it without their family. The dysfunction, the intergenerational abuse, it just continues, and everyone's afraid to report it because of threat of life, the beatings, or some other thing they may leverage them with, right? So some people are just too afraid to come forward.
So, okay, that seems like a really hard nut to crack when you have a whole family involved. But let's move on to the other people who their children are in danger and they don't even know it.
Yeah, I tell you, the technology, cell phones, computers, anything that's a communication device. We just were talking with some folks last week. A girl 10 years old was on Instagram, Snapchat, one of those, Twitter. Yeah. I can't remember exactly which one. Somebody poses there as they're a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. Hey, I want to get to know you. So they groom this relationship over months, 4, 5, 6 months. And then the question comes, hey, send me a picture. Hey, can you send me a nude picture? Hey, just send me a picture of your top. And it's amazing. And we've seen these conversations where at first there's resistance, but then there's peer pressure. Everyone's doing it, you know. And the next thing you know, these individuals have nude pictures of these minors.
Wow.
And several things can occur from there. One, they're sold, because child pornography in the United States is rampant. We are the number one producer and consumer of child pornography in the world.
Wow.
In the world. So now these images are sold. Or maybe they contact the minor and say, hey, we're going to share these on all the social media platforms. We're going to tell the people in school. We're going to tell your parents. We're going to tell your pastor. We're going to tell all your friends, unless you do this. And then the next thing you know, they are leveraged to the point that they're in something that they can't get out of. And they're so embarrassed to tell anybody.
So it's a culture of fear that is created.
Fear, manipulation, coercion, all of the above. These traffickers and pedophiles are so calculating and so manipulative that it's an organized network of people. They know what they're doing. They can spot vulnerability. They can spot when they have something that they can leverage. And even for not only children, even young moms, 18, 19, 20 years old, we've heard cases where they've met a guy, and for a month or so, 2 months, 3 months, they're dating, they become a couple, they get to know the family. A year in, they maybe say, hey, we're going to move down to another city. That's where my job's taking me. And they get there, and then the person pushes them in and says, now you're going to work for me.
Wow.
Because I got a lot of money invested in you. I got first and last month's rent on an apartment, full of food. You've got to pay me back. If you don't, I'm putting your 3-year-old daughter on the street, and I'm going to enter them into the child pornography trade. So they're trapped. Number one, they're embarrassed. They're afraid to call home. And then this individual may threaten to harm their family because they know their family, they know where they live. So it's a trap. And it's, you know, psychologically, once you instill fear into somebody, you have a lot of control over them.
That's true.
So they know that. And we've seen traffickers who have rehabilitated themselves. They've done prison time. They start volunteering for ministries because they felt what they did and they realized some mistakes.
Really?
There's a book. They've actually written documents that they share on how to groom, how to recruit, and how to traffic vulnerable people. It's that organized.
Wow.
They'll tell you the tactics, the tradecraft, routes, how to move them from state to state, undercover. You know, it's truly a organized cartel, which it is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world right now. The United States is also for sure. It's growing here. And second to the cartel and just as organized.
You also mentioned slave labor and organ trafficking. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I don't think a lot of people know that also goes on.
Oh, absolutely. And we are looking at all of that. It's not just a commercial sex trade. It's also forced labor and harvesting of organs. Forced labor is also a global problem, also here in the United States. And how that works is folks will come from other countries seeking a promise of a job. It could be in agriculture, it could be in hotel, it could be really anything that gets their attention. Once they arrive, if they come in legally, sometimes they'll take their passports and then they force them into a job that they really didn't want. And if it is the job they wanted, it depends on what industry it's in. Let's say they pay them $300 a week. Well, they also own the apartment building where they stay, so they charge them $200 a week rent. And it's usually a multiple living with many family members in a 2-bedroom. They crowd them in.
Wow.
So now they don't have a passport, or if they're here illegally or don't have any registration or any type of supporting documents, the persons are afraid to call law enforcement because they're here illegally. They come from countries where law enforcement is very heavy-handed.